Welcome to the new video of Neurophilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking, and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin. The mind that won't rest. Let me ask you something, quietly, honestly. Do you ever feel like your mind just won't shut up? Not in a dramatic way, not panic, just a constant hum. A low-grade tension beneath everything you do. Even when life looks fine on the surface, your body feels braced, like it's waiting for impact. You lie in bed at night staring at the ceiling, chest tight, breathing shallow, scrolling your phone without really seeing anything. You replay conversations. You revisit old decisions. You predict disasters that haven't happened yet. And no matter how much you think, relief never comes. Only more unease. There's a name society gives this feeling. Anxiety. And with that name comes a verdict. You've been told it's a disorder, a malfunction in your brain chemistry, something to fix, manage, medicate, or hide. You're taught, subtly and not so subtly, that calm is the default state of a healthy person. That if you're anxious, something has gone wrong inside you. Look around. Social media celebrates the unbothered, the serene, the people who seem effortlessly grounded, always smiling, always centered, always okay. And if you don't feel like that, the implication is clear. You're failing at being human. But what if that entire framework is upside down? What if anxiety isn't a defect, but a signal? This is where Rollo May enters the conversation. Unlike many psychologists who treated anxiety as pathology, May looked deeper. He didn't ask how to eliminate anxiety. He asked why it exists at all, and what he discovered was unsettling, but also liberating. Anxiety, he argued, is not just a problem. It's a message. You feel anxious because you are aware that your life matters, aware that your choices carry weight, aware that time is moving forward whether you're ready or not. Animals don't experience anxiety the way humans do. They react to threats in the present. A predator appears, they flee. Once the danger passes, their bodies return to calm. Humans don't live only in the present. We live in the future. We imagine, we anticipate, we reflect. We see 10 possible outcomes in every decision. That capacity, the one that keeps you awake at night, is not a flaw. It's consciousness. That tight feeling in your chest, that's not weakness. That's awareness pressing against uncertainty. You're anxious because you know things could go wrong, but also because you know they could go right. And that possibility comes with responsibility. To choose, to act, to risk regret. Anxiety emerges at the intersection of freedom and meaning. It shows up when something matters enough that failure would hurt. And here's the part most people never hear. Trying to eliminate anxiety entirely is not just unrealistic, it's dehumanizing. To remove anxiety would be to remove imagination, responsibility, creativity, and depth. It would mean becoming numb, mechanical, safe, but asleep. The problem isn't that your mind won't shut up. The problem is that no one ever taught you how to listen. So instead of asking, how do I get rid of this feeling? The better question is, what is this feeling trying to tell me? This isn't a promise of comfort. It's an invitation to truth. Because anxiety isn't here to destroy you. It's here because something in your life demands attention. Something unfinished. Something unlived. Something unresolved. And until you understand that, your mind will keep knocking. Not because it's broken, but because you're awake. Anxiety and the price of freedom. We've been taught to treat anxiety as fear. That tightness in your chest? Fear. That sense of dread before making a decision? Fear. The restless energy that follows you from room to room? Fear. But Rollo May was precise about this distinction, and it changes everything. Fear has an object. It points to something concrete. You see a snake, your body reacts. You're about to lose your job, your stomach drops. Fear says, that thing right there can hurt me. It's specific, situational, and often temporary. Once the threat is gone, fear fades. Anxiety is different. Anxiety has no clear target. It doesn't announce itself. It lingers like fog. You feel tense, but you can't name why. Something feels off, but nothing obvious is wrong. That's why anxiety feels so unsettling. There's no single thing to fight, flee from, or fix. But this lack of clarity is also what gives anxiety its depth. May believed anxiety arises not from danger, but from possibility. It appears when you stand before uncertainty, when you realize that your life is not predetermined. You could choose this path or that one. You could stay or leave. You could speak or stay silent. And none of those choices come with guarantees. This is the moment anxiety enters. Not because you're weak, but because you're free. Freedom sounds like a gift, but it carries a hidden cost. When you're free, you're responsible. Every decision excludes countless others. Every step forward closes a door behind you. Anxiety is the tension that comes from knowing your life is shaped by your choices and that you will have to live with the consequences. Animals don't experience this tension. They act according to instinct. Humans must decide who they are becoming. Anxiety is the dizziness that arises when you realize you are not a machine. You are not programmed. You are standing on the edge of your own future with no map and no guarantees. May called anxiety the price of freedom, and this is why anxiety often intensifies when nothing is outwardly wrong. You're not responding to a threat. You're confronting possibility, a new job, a relationship, a creative urge, a truth you've been avoiding. Anxiety surfaces when something meaningful is at stake. This also explains why people who feel no anxiety at all are not necessarily healthier. May warn that a complete absence of anxiety often signals denial, a refusal to engage with life's uncertainty. People who numb themselves through distraction, obedience, or rigid routines can move through life without anxiety, but also without depth. They avoid pain, but they also avoid responsibility. They trade freedom for safety. Anxiety, then, is not a malfunction. It's a signal that you are standing at a crossroads, that your mind is aware of the weight of choice, that you understand, even subconsciously, that what you do next matters. The tragedy of modern culture is that it tells you to eliminate this feeling rather than understand it. You're encouraged to calm down, relax, stop overthinking. But anxiety is not excess thought. It's excess meaning. It appears when your inner world knows that something significant is unfolding. The goal isn't to destroy anxiety. The goal is to learn how to stand in it without collapsing. When you stop treating anxiety as fear, it loses some of its power over you. It becomes information instead of a verdict, a signal rather than a sentence. It's not asking you to run, it's asking you to choose. And that's uncomfortable because freedom always is. But within that discomfort is the beginning of agency. The moment you realize anxiety is not the enemy, but the cost of becoming someone real. A world that no longer holds anxiety. If anxiety is a natural part of being human, if it's the price we pay for awareness, imagination, and freedom, then one question becomes unavoidable. Why does it feel so overwhelming now? Rollo May believed the answer had very little to do with personal weakness. He didn't think modern people were fragile or incapable of handling life. He believed something far more unsettling. Society had lost its ability to hold anxiety. In earlier cultures, anxiety was expected. It had a place. It had meaning. It wasn't treated as an error in the system, but as a passage to be moved through. People didn't face uncertainty alone. They had rituals, stories, symbols, and shared practices that helped them metabolize fear, loss, and the unknown. There were rites of passage that marked transitions, ceremonies for birth, adulthood, marriage, aging, and death. Religious and spiritual frameworks that gave language to suffering, communities that witnessed grief instead of demanding performance. These weren't just traditions for comfort, they were containers, structures that helped people carry existential tension without being crushed by it. Modern life dismantled those containers. We replaced ritual with routine, meaning with efficiency, belonging with visibility. We traded depth for convenience. The result isn't freedom, it's exposure. Anxiety still arises, but now it does so in a vacuum. There's no shared language for it, no collective pause, no place to set it down. So when anxiety surfaces, we treat it like a personal failure. We tell ourselves to be productive. to push through, to stay busy, to numb the discomfort with scrolling, shopping, substances, or constant noise. And when that doesn't work, we label ourselves broken, disordered, defective. But here's the truth most people sense but rarely say out loud. Modern life overwhelms the nervous system by design. You are expected to process constant information, perpetual comparison, economic pressure, social evaluation, and existential uncertainty, without rest, without ritual, without real containment. And when your system protests, you're told the problem is you. May saw this clearly. He argued that we live in a culture that manufactures anxiety and then punishes people for feeling it. A culture that demands machine-like performance from human beings, then medicates or marginalizes them when their inner world pushes back. This is why anxiety today feels louder, sharper, more relentless. Not because it has changed, but because the structures that once helped us carry it are gone. Anxiety without meaning becomes torment. Anxiety without context becomes paralysis. You can feel this in the quiet moments, the sense that something is missing, that life feels busy but hollow, comfortable but disconnected. We chase dopamine hits and distractions not because we're shallow, but because we're starving for grounding, for something that makes the tension make sense. And here's the part that's hardest to accept. You can't fix this by working harder on yourself. You can't out-optimize a cultural wound. No amount of productivity, self-improvement, or distraction will eliminate a signal that is pointing to a deeper loss. Anxiety persists because it's asking a question the modern world refuses to answer. What gives life meaning when old frameworks collapse? That question has no easy solution, and that's precisely why it's avoided. But avoidance only intensifies the pressure. Anxiety waits, it accumulates, it knocks louder. This is the turning point. If anxiety is not a defect, and if society no longer provides containers for it, then the responsibility returns to you, not to eliminate anxiety, but to learn how to work with it, to build your own inner structures, your own practices, your own ways of holding uncertainty without being consumed by it. This is where theory ends and transformation begins, because anxiety, when approached with honesty instead of avoidance, becomes a guide, but only if you're willing to stop numbing it and start listening. And that's the work ahead. Naming the storm and the cost of self-betrayal. Once you stop treating anxiety as an enemy, something unsettling happens. It stops feeling random. That pressure in your chest, that unease that follows you into certain rooms, certain conversations, certain thoughts, it begins to feel directional, like it's pointing somewhere you've been avoiding. And this is where anxiety becomes uncomfortable in a different way. Not overwhelming, but revealing. Rollo May believed that chronic anxiety often isn't about being overstimulated or overwhelmed. It's about being misaligned, about living in contradiction with your own values, about performing a life that looks acceptable on the outside but feels false on the inside. This is what he called inauthentic existence. Most people don't wake up one day and decide to betray themselves. It happens slowly. You say yes when you mean no. You choose safety over truth. You stay quiet to avoid conflict. You accept roles that don't fit because they offer approval, stability, or belonging. Over time, the gap between who you are and who you live as widens. Anxiety fills that gap. At first, it's subtle, a vague discomfort, a background tension. You tell yourself you're just stressed, that everyone feels this way. But anxiety doesn't dissolve with reassurance, because it isn't asking for comfort. It's asking for honesty. May argued that persistent anxiety is often the psyche's protest against self-betrayal. Not fear of failure, but fear of abandoning yourself. Your body knows when you are living out of alignment, even when your mind explains it away. You feel it when you walk into places that drain you, when you say, "I'm fine," and feel a tightening in your throat. When you imagine living this same life 5 years from now and something in you recoils. That reaction is not irrational, it's information. This is why naming anxiety is essential. A problem you can't name is a problem you can't face. When anxiety remains foggy and undefined, it controls you. But when you give it language, it begins to lose its grip. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" you ask, "What am I avoiding? What decision have you been postponing? What conversation are you afraid to have? Where are you pretending you have no choice when you do? These are not comfortable questions. They threaten the structures you've built to stay safe, but they also reveal the source of your suffering. Anxiety intensifies not because you're weak, but because something inside you knows the truth and refuses to stay silent. Here's the paradox. The moment you begin acting in alignment, anxiety often softens. Not because life becomes easier, but because the internal conflict eases. Your nervous system relaxes when your actions match your values. You're no longer fighting yourself. That doesn't mean anxiety disappears. It changes. It becomes sharper, more focused. It points to growth instead of paralysis. You feel nervous before telling the truth, not because it's wrong, but because it matters. Ignoring anxiety makes it louder. Listening to it makes it clearer. This is the cost of authenticity. You lose the comfort of pretending. You risk disapproval. You face uncertainty. But you regain something far more important: self-respect, coherence, integrity. And when you stop betraying yourself, anxiety no longer needs to scream. It becomes a signal instead of a siren, a guide instead of a threat. But there's one more step, because even when you live more truthfully, anxiety doesn't vanish into silence. It turns into energy, and that energy demands movement. In the next chapter, we'll explore how that restless force becomes creative power, how anxiety, when channeled instead of suppressed, fuels creation, expression, and meaningful action. Creative courage and moving with anxiety. There is one final illusion that keeps people trapped in lives they quietly resent: the belief that you must feel ready before you act. You tell yourself that once the anxiety fades, once clarity arrives, once confidence settles in, then you'll make the move. You'll speak up. You'll start the project. You'll change the situation. But that moment never comes. Not because you're incapable, but because it doesn't exist. Rollo May understood this with brutal clarity. Meaningful action does not follow the absence of anxiety. It follows the presence of courage. And courage in May's work was never about fearlessness. It was about acting while fear is still in the room. He called this creative courage. Creative courage is not dramatic. It doesn't feel powerful in the moment. Often it feels awkward, shaky, and exposed. It's sending the message you've been avoiding, making the call that tightens your chest, opening a blank document and writing the first unpolished sentence, saying the thing that might change everything. Most people wait because they believe anxiety is a stop sign. But anxiety is not a command. It's a signal of significance. The stronger it is, the more something matters. Waiting only amplifies it, because deep down you know you're avoiding the very thing that would restore your sense of agency. This is the paradox. Anxiety shrinks only when you move through it. Not around it, not over it, through it. Each small act taken in the presence of anxiety rewires your relationship to it. You teach your nervous system a quiet but powerful truth. This feeling does not control me. You learn that you can carry tension and still move forward. That discomfort is survivable. That fear is not fatal. This is how resilience is built, not by eliminating anxiety, but by holding it without collapse. Creative courage also explains why anxiety and creativity are so often linked. The same mind that imagines catastrophe also imagines possibility. Anxiety is imagination under pressure. When you suppress it, it turns inward and corrodes you. When you express it, it becomes creation. You don't need to be an artist. You don't need talent or permission. Creation can be writing one honest paragraph, recording a voice note you never share, building something small, speaking a truth that's been stuck in your throat. Expression gives anxiety a direction. Action gives it purpose. But creative courage goes beyond expression. It extends into the world. It's choosing to act in alignment even when the outcome is uncertain. It's accepting that anxiety may accompany you for a long time and deciding to live fully anyway. This is where transformation actually happens. Not in insight alone, but in movement. Not in waiting for certainty, but in choosing despite uncertainty. So here's the question that matters now. What are you avoiding because of anxiety? Not someday, not eventually, right now. Is it a conversation, a decision, a truth you haven't admitted to yourself, a step you've delayed for months or years? Don't aim for the perfect action. Take the smallest possible version of it, a whisper instead of a speech, a draft instead of a masterpiece, a step instead of a leap. And when anxiety rises, as it will, name it, acknowledge it, then move anyway. That is creative courage, not heroic fearlessness, but human vulnerability in motion. Anxiety was never meant to imprison you. It was meant to point you toward what matters. When you stop running from it and start walking with it, it becomes the force that carries you forward, not away from life, but directly into it.